Hello, and welcome to our third in a series of our Commit to Calm webinars. We're super happy that you can join us this evening, and we look forward to taking your questions and hopefully helping you walk away with some great strategies for how food can help calm your stress and anxiety. My name is Kristen Smith, and I'm the Outreach Coordinator for Oakdale ObGyn. I am joined by Andy Meyer, who is our technical consultant, and he assures that we keep this webinar up and running. I'd like to go over just a few housekeeping details, and then I'll turn it over to Kim. So this webinar will be available tomorrow on our website. You can access that from the home page and just look for Commit to Calm. The handouts are also on that same page, and Andy will also have them in the chat box so that you can download them and follow along with Kim. We will be taking questions tonight in 3 chunks. Kim's presentation addresses 3 different areas of practical things that you can do using food. And so we're going to take questions after each of those 3 content areas. And of course, we'll do our best to help moderate the questions as they come in. And so with that, I'm going to introduce Kim and look forward to a great presentation. She always does such a great job. So Kim Plessel is a registered dietitian, and she sees women of all ages at Oakdale ObGyn. She is really more than a dietitian, though, in my mind, and that's a lot of that is because she has so much training and really has, I think, worked to stay on trend with the science that is out there. She's a certified intuitive eating counselor. She is a certified chronic disease self-management counselor. She is an adult weight management counselor, and probably the coolest thing that she's done of late, and maybe she'll disagree with me, is she is certified now in functional medicine and nutrition. So she's using all of this to incorporate into her client care. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Kim.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. I'm so happy that we can connect virtually, but I am looking forward to seeing you in person in the future. So I just hope that this seminar today is useful. I know that the last 2 weeks have been incredibly interesting for me to be a participant of. And so the goal really was to explore several different strategies that you can use to help cultivate calm. And so when we talk about cultivating calm, it's really looking at, can we use some of Patty's mindfulness strategies that she used through meditation or deep breathing, or some of Maria's healing touch through acupressure. And tonight, what I'm going to go over is how we can use the foods that we choose and our diet patterns to really help ground us so that we can have that sense of tranquility and peacefulness. So like Kristen mentioned, we're going to discuss this in 3 different components. And my hope is that 1 or 2 of these strategies within potentially one of these components speaks to you. I know that there's a wide variety of needs and interests of participants today on this call. So I hope that you leave with 1 or 2 strategies that you can incorporate, and you really come back to this webinar or the PowerPoint slides when you're ready to deepen your approach. I think sometimes with nutrition, we get excited and we really want to go all in. And at some point, that's amazing and wonderful. And I'm excited when people are motivated to do so. But I also want to make sure that this is a very digestible and very sustainable strategies that you can use so that you can continue to use these throughout the years ahead. So my recommendation always is to personalize whatever works best for you. So hopefully you'll find 1 or 2 things that pique your interest that you can explore. And then when you're ready, deepen that and come back to some of this content and see if there's other ways that you can deepen your nutrition and your health for more tranquility and peace. So tonight, we're going to talk about the importance of stabilizing our blood sugar and how that can help cultivate calm. We're going to talk about the connection between the brain and our digestive system, so how we can nourish our gut. And then lastly, we're going to delve into a few of the key nutrients that are important, especially if you may be deficient, and so that we can identify which foods might be useful to incorporate into your daily diet or weekly routine, so that you can also cultivate calm by replenishing some of those nutrients. So I wanted to start with blood sugar and mood, because it really helps us to appreciate that our overall pattern is what matters most. And so it's really exciting when we hear about therapeutic foods. And a lot of times when I'm working one-on-one with clients, I try to highlight like small therapeutic foods that they can incorporate throughout their typical routine just to enhance their nutrition. But tonight I really wanted to start first with what is the flow? What does your general eating pattern look like throughout the week? So a lot of times, you know, this past year and a half, I would venture, and I was asking Kristen if you could almost do like a raise your hand if you agree with me. How many of you have had an interruption to your general life pattern? I would probably guess that most of us have. So early in 2020, all of a sudden I was cooking 3 meals a day and my children were distance learning at home. And now I'm transitioning to working all remote. And so that's brought a whole different pattern into my eating. And so having the kitchen just a few steps away. So I want to kind of think about, what is your general pattern? What kind of flow do you have? And the reason why this is important is that when we don't have some kind of rhythm to the way that we eat, that really raises our vulnerability. So a lot of times when we're vulnerable, that's when we're going to react. That's when I hear clients say, I'm so frustrated, I'm having these cravings, you know, I don't know why I'm craving sugar, or I'm eating more than I want to. And so instead of fixating on more of like what's wrong, I usually try to look before that episode of vulnerability to see if there's some way that we can enhance your pattern so that you don't become vulnerable. What that specifically means with blood sugar is that if you are skipping meals or missing meals, whether life is busy and you're trying to get the kids out the door to school, whether you're running late to work and you have a long commute, or whether you're just stressed and you forget to eat. A lot of times when we miss consistent meals or we eat more sporadically, our blood sugar is going to fall. What a lot of people don't realize is that when our blood sugar is falling and all of a sudden we're feeling ravenous and reacting, that's actually because our body will release stress hormones when our blood sugar is falling. And that's because evolutionary, what we're trying to do is that will cue our body to release stored blood sugar, stored glucose out of from our liver to keep our blood sugar a little steady. So a lot of times when our blood sugar is falling, that actually is cueing our stress hormones to be released. So it's trying to help us survive. It's doing what it's meant to do. It may not feel right in this day and age. And so what we're trying to do is really notice that our eating patterns setting you up to be vulnerable. Are you becoming overly hungry or reactive? Are you noticing that your blood sugar is falling? You're having difficulty concentrating, or you're starting to feel shaky or distracted? It's probably a sign that we need to look earlier and set your patterns up for success. Because if your blood sugar is fluctuating from low until high, when we start reacting often with sugar or more processed snacks, you're going to be on this roller coaster ride. And that is actually going to release more stress hormones and contribute to our anxiety and our irritability. You'll know if you are feeling this usually late morning or late afternoon. And so, you know, a lot of times people will express a desire for simple carbohydrates. They'll often have temporary relief, but it almost exacerbates the symptoms an hour or two later. So trying to think about what can we do to set ourselves up for success. Part of it is just getting consistent. And so if you notice that you're becoming vulnerable, don't fixate on that moment, but rather look earlier in the day and ask yourself, well, did I miss a meal because I was busy with work? stressed, drinking coffee or diet sodas and not noticing your hunger cues until almost they peak and they make you contribute to your reaction. Or were you just missing part of that balanced plate? So were you falling into that vulnerability? Trying to increase more of a consistent pattern earlier in the day has been shown to help set you up for success. So I generally encourage people to nourish themselves with breakfast consistently, or even a late morning snack if you prefer not to eat right away when you're waking up, just because research has shown that when we distribute our calories earlier in the day, we tend to have better metabolic outcomes. And what that means is we tend to eat less later. And I don't know about you, but I am much more mindful in the morning about what I'm willing to eat and want to eat. I'm a little bit less in tune sometimes if it's 8, 9, 10 o'clock at night and I'm hungry at that hour. That tends to be a little bit more difficult time of day for women to choose healthier snacks. So just want to encourage you, think about distributing your calories a little bit earlier in the day. Don't be worried if you're eating a larger breakfast, because you will probably reduce the calories later in the day. This has actually been shown to be useful for weight loss for some women as well. So if you are trying to rebound from some weight gain over the last 1.5 years of COVID and the lifestyle changes, this would also be a strategy that you could consider. Now, another part of just helping you to stay grounded is to use a really simple plate visual. And so a lot of times I think, again, nutrition can be very complex and we can definitely deconstruct it, but there's so much power when we kind of come back and out and just try to keep it simple. And so things that will stabilize your blood sugar and help to stabilize your mood is really trying to ensure that you're having some kind of balance at your 3 main meals. Now, what I've got here on the slides is Harvard's healthy eating plate. I recognize that we don't necessarily eat all of these foods at one time. So the ones that I would protect spaced out throughout the day, especially in the morning, is protecting protein, because protein is going to help us satiate. It's going to help us feel satisfied, not vulnerable or hungry in between our meals. And then the other part of the plate I would prioritize is the side of the plants. And so specifically the fruits and the vegetables, because the fiber will always slow down our blood sugar responses and help to steady out our blood sugar responses through that meal and the hours thereafter. So sometimes people say, well, Kim, what's the best snack to have? If you want to use this plate, this is how I think about it. If I wake up and I decide, I'm just going to have a banana right away because I'm just a little bit hungry and I want to, go for a walk with my dog, or if I'm trying to help my children go off to school, I'll have my fruit right away. Then what I'll do literally is visualize this plate and think, well, when I'm hungry again, finish your breakfast. So this plate, literally, you can visualize as 3 times a day. And you can almost visualize it as, if you like to snack or graze more than have set meals, I want you to think about balancing through this plate 3 times a day. So an example of having fruit right away, I know that the next time I'm hungry, I'm definitely going to prioritize some kind of protein in the morning. And so a lot of times that will be some Greek yogurt, that could be some eggs, that could be, some nuts. And so just trying to ensure that I kind of come around and I have the protein. And then usually I incorporate some kind of like seeds or nuts with that, just to incorporate some healthy fats. Then a couple hours later, I'm letting you know kind of here's my routine that I've reestablished through COVID. A lot of times I'm still hungry, and that's when I'm going to go for my whole grains and I'll have a little bowl of oatmeal. And so you can kind of see how it's an easy strategy if you are feeling like, oh, I'm getting hungry, but I'm not quite sure what to eat. You can use this really nice, simple visual and just kind of dance around this plate through breakfast or the morning hours. At lunch, the plate resets. So then again, let's try to protect the protein and volumize the vegetables and the plants. And then whatever grains or fruits or additional, sauces or dressings that you want to incorporate, of course. So I just like to reiterate that it's the protein spacing is really beneficial, especially if you are a woman over 40, because we're trying to keep our lean muscle as we age. It helps us to feel satiated between meals. And there's a lot of wonderful protein options that are both animal and plant-based for us to be able to do so. The other strategy, again, as I mentioned, I'm going to talk about the power of plants most throughout this seminar. And so just having that plant fiber, I'll get into that in a little bit, but that will also help to steady out your blood sugar and set you up for more success. Then for the carbs, you know, I have a lot of questions these days because of the popularity of keto and like the low carb approach. You know, it isn't necessarily that you need to restrict the carbohydrates. It's more that I'd rather have you focus on consuming quality sources. And so what that means is looking for, you know, that section of the plate that you can see for the whole grains. Is there a way to choose a higher fiber, less processed grain that you can enjoy? So oatmeal is an example of what I had already mentioned for breakfast. At lunch, I might use some starchy vegetables like some squash or sweet potato, or even some wild rice that I will put on either a bowl or a salad. And so what you're trying to do with the carbohydrates to steady out your blood sugar is really think about, like, how can I choose high fiber quality sources? If you're curious, high fiber usually is anything that grows in nature and typically has one ingredient on the ingredient list. At the most 7, but typically I try to get to, like, if you recognize it and it can be grown in nature, it's probably a quality carbohydrate. Beans are great. They have a little bit of carbohydrate and protein. Whole grains, starchy vegetables, fruit, those are all great quality carbs. The reason why I bring that up is that I have a lot of clients that have come to me recently and they're literally eating, they're volumizing their vegetables, they're protecting their protein, but they're really not eating any carbs, like starches, at their meals. And then they come to me like, Kim, I'm craving cereal, I'm craving crackers, I am getting into the cookies. And that's understandable. So part of it may be an experiment that you could consider is that if you put a small amount of some quality high fiber carbohydrates back into your meals, see if your cravings come down, see if your blood sugar steadies out. Because I think a lot of times one pattern I see often is that we are trying to eat really clean. I applaud the efforts. They're doing just literally protein and vegetables, but they're just not getting enough carbohydrates, and that's kind of cueing the cravings. So that one strategy is to put them back in, experiment, and see how your day unfolds. Notice your mood. Does it steady out, especially around the more challenging times, whether it's that late afternoon or maybe after dinner time period? That's an opportunity for you to think through, how can I shift things for myself and set up a rhythm and a pattern to be the most supportive for me? So that was really a focus on the initial patterns. I would love any questions or thoughts or comments from the participants. I hope that was helpful just to start us off, but any questions?
Yes, we have a number of questions. The first one is, how could this fit in with intermittent fasting? And briefly, how do you feel about intermittent fasting?
You know, the intermittent fasting research is continuing to unfold. It's very intriguing. There's some very promising studies on looking at blood sugar, cholesterol parameters. So looking at more of those metabolic labs that are improving. When it comes specifically to weight loss, the research has shown that intermittent fasting or a sustained calorie deficit are equal. They're both effective. So I really try to personalize if someone's interested in intermittent fasting. We just need to make sure that you're protecting your lean muscle, because when you shorten that eating window, you know, especially depending on like where your lean muscle mass is at, sometimes, you know, protein spacing helps to keep that muscle anabolic. It's kind of like muscle growth opportunity. So if you're trying to lose weight, it is important to continue to space protein throughout the day every 3 to 5 hours. I think you can definitely look at a way to do that with a time restricted eating. Some people would prefer to do intermittent fasting, and they're eating their calories more earlier in the day, and they're just trying to stop by 6 or 7 p.m. so that they extend the fast while they sleep. So there's several, considerations. There are some promising studies on metabolic health, but there's also some risks. So you just need to make sure that it's appropriate for you. And the main risk, just looking at with anyone that's taking medications for diabetes, just that you don't have a low blood sugar if you're not eating. So you just want to make sure that you're communicating that with your endocrinology team. Otherwise, the other key factor, I just want to make sure that you're not losing muscle if you're doing intermittent fasting for weight loss. So those would be a couple considerations, but good question.
All right. Here's another one. Will we be talking about anti-inflammatory foods? And I think that you are going to be doing that.
Yes, absolutely. And so I'm just introducing more of the patterns, but we're going to talk all about quality tonight. Yes, that's coming.
What if your appetite isn't great, so it's hard to tell if your blood sugar is low? This person is shaky and anxious in the mornings. Could this be why? Maybe low blood sugar. Should I eat more protein for breakfast? Should I just be eating more?
Again, some people feel their hunger differently, which is really, or their feeling of low blood sugar. Sometimes it's not that we're having significant lows. It's just that our blood sugar does fluctuate for each of us throughout our routine. So I would feel it through hunger at my gut level, but I have other clients, and I also feel it when I start to feel shaky. I can't concentrate. So I notice that I can't focus. So those are some signs that I have personally experienced and that I've heard a lot of my clients express as well. So again, just a small amount, it doesn't take a lot to just kind of eat something small and just see how you feel. Some people are not hungry in the morning if they're snacking a lot at night. So if you're waking up, we might start with just adding something really small to see if it steadies you out and you feel a little bit calmer. And then what you may notice is that your hunger cues pick up as you kind of like shift your calories earlier in the day.
All right. One more question. Is it better to eat oatmeal maybe for late morning or lunch rather than first thing in the morning?
It would depend on several factors. So part of it would depend on if, some people wake up with diabetes or pre-diabetes and they have a high fasting blood sugar. In those situations, those clients tend to feel better on a little bit more of a protein-centric breakfast and then eat like their oatmeal a little bit later in the day. For others, it depends on, I like to be active in the morning to start my day off. So I like to eat carbohydrates right away, because when we eat carbohydrates, what it does is it kind of reduces some of the stress hormones that naturally rise and help wake us up. So a lot of us, when we think about our circadian rhythm, the reason why we're waking up is that literally cortisol, which is considered like a stress hormone. It's got good benefits as well, but a lot of you have probably heard about the word cortisol. It's the stress hormone released from the adrenal glands. A lot of times the reason why we're waking up is that cortisol is rising, and that's part of our circadian rhythm. So if you exercise in the morning and you don't necessarily eat carbohydrates before that, and depending on how intense you're exercising, sometimes then it's just adding stress. So I actually like to eat a carbohydrate earlier in the morning because it brings down the cortisol levels. And I wouldn't want to stress my body by moving early if because in essence, what it's going to happen is my body's going to use muscle for fuel if I don't eat the carbohydrates, because I'm tending towards cardiovascular activity in the morning. So if that is similar to you, I don't think you need to fear having the carbohydrates when you wake up. But again, it's a very personal decision. If you just want to eat something light, maybe you would just do some Greek yogurt that has a small amount of carbohydrates and more protein. If you are someone living with high blood sugar concerns, then, we can definitely personalize that to your patterns as well. And you would probably also feel better on a little bit more of a protein-centric breakfast. Any other questions?
Nope, we're good.
Okay, perfect. And just so everyone knows, I mean, there's 100 of you on this call or more. This is really meant to be individualized. So there's pros and cons of every diet pattern. And so really it comes down to what's in your best interests. And so I hope that that came across. There's always going to be advocates and critics of different diet strategies. Really what should be the driver is what works best for your life and with your health history. So there's a role for everything. And I just want to make sure that if you would like to discuss that further and just personalize that, I would love to connect with you sometime after this seminar. Okay, so the second phase that we're going to talk about for nutrition strategies to calm and help us establish that tranquility is really the research that is unfolding about our gut health. So, you know, typically when we think about our feelings and, you know, whether we have any stress or anxiety, we usually think of like the chatter that is in our brain. But that's important. But there's a lot of research coming out about our second brain, and it's actually the digestive system or the gut, which is typically how it's called, is literally been coined our second brain. And so it's intriguing because our digestive system actually has its own independent nervous system, and it has 5 times the neurons of our spinal cord. So we're learning so much about our gut health and how our digestive system is speaking to our mind and how our mind is speaking to our gut. They are very connected. So a lot of times I have clients, if you are struggling with stress or anxiety or depression, a lot of people will have digestive issues because the brain is speaking to the gut. But there's also some research that's unfolding that if we can calm the gut, if we can do an anti-inflammatory diet, feed the gut some of the key nutrients that it needs, it actually will work upstream and help to calm the mind. And so if you've heard me speak in the past, you've probably heard of the microbiome, but just in case you haven't, the microbiome is literally the trillions, 100 trillion bacteria or microorganisms that live in our body. And there's actually a National Institutes of Health has been studying this for quite some time, and we're continuing to learn. What we found is that there are bacteria that can be symbiotic, which means health promoting. They can coexist, so they're commensal, or they can coexist in us. So they don't necessarily help us, but they don't hurt us. And then there's actually negative bacteria that are more pathogenic. And what we're looking at right now in the literature is really trying to see, you know, based on someone's type of bacteria and the proportion of the different strains in their gut microbiome, does that correlate with mental health? And so just so you know, these microbes outnumber our cells 10 to 1. And we're going to talk about how we can nourish them well. And the reason why is that not only does the gut produce 95% of the serotonin in our body. And so we're going to talk about serotonin in a minute, but that's that feel good kind of calming neurotransmitter. But also the microbiome, when we feed them well, they actually create anti-inflammatory compounds for us. So not only can we put anti-inflammatory foods in our body, but when we nourish the gut microbiome, they actually will create something that comes up and out as anti-inflammatory compounds that significantly can help protect our health. They're called short-chain fatty acids if you're curious and you want to Google that later, but we will talk about how to nourish these bacteria so that we create these anti-inflammatory compounds from the inside out. But I just want to take a second just to demonstrate how connected the mind and the gut are. So if you could just take a moment, I'm going to invite you to just close your eyes, and we're going to just do a brief visualization just to demonstrate how our mind can impact our physiological or our physical responses. So take a deep breath. close your eyes. And I just want you to take a moment, and I want you to visualize yourself standing in your kitchen. I want you to notice the sounds that may be happening. Is there a slow hum of a dishwasher running or a refrigerator? Are there people in the kitchen, talking with each other? Do you notice the visuals of the countertops, the color of the countertops, the appliances, the cupboards? Do you have windows that you can look out from your kitchen? Can you see outside, or are you more in the interior of your home? And now take a minute to just notice if there's any smells. And as you look around, I want you to visualize looking down at your countertop and imagine seeing a cutting board sitting there with a fresh, juicy lemon. So now in your mind, hold the lemon in one hand, feel its weight, notice the texture of the skin, and then place it back on the board and carefully lift a knife and cut it in half. Feel the resistance to the knife and how it gives way as the lemon splits. Notice the pale yellow of the pulp and the whiteness of the inner peel. And see if you may have cut through a seed or two. Visualize yourself cutting one of the halves in two. And notice where a drop or two of juice has purled on the surface of one of the quarters. Now imagine lifting the lemon wedge to your mouth, smelling the sharp, fresh scent. And now bite into the sour, juicy pulp. Okay, you can open your eyes. I'm just curious if you noticed any kind of physical reaction to that imagery exercise. Even as I worked you through this, I could tell I was salivating and I was like puckering. And so I just wanted to show you that even when we take a moment to visualize how connected our thoughts are to stimulating our physical responses. If anyone has any feedback on that, feel free to put that in the chat. I would love to hear about it in a minute. And so this is just trying to show the power of the connection between the brain and the digestive system. So when we think about how are we going to nourish our gut, there's going to be many opportunities. And so we can first start off looking at, can we put good, live, active, probiotic rich foods into our bodies? We're going to talk about how we can feed them well so they create those anti-inflammatory compounds. And then we're also going to talk about the importance of plant diversity. So a lot of you have heard about the importance of probiotic rich foods. It's something that would be an opportunity if you could add cultured foods into your typical dietary pattern. You can do this through easy, buttermilk, yogurt, kefir, or cottage cheese, and those could be dairy or non-dairy based. You also can introduce live active cultures through fermented foods. So sauerkraut, miso, or tempeh, if you like soy products, kimchi. I bought some amazing kimchi at the farmer's market in Maple Grove this summer. And pickles actually will also sometimes have live and active cultures. I will tell one story quick. If you go over to Whole Foods, they have a brand of pickles called Bubbies. You will definitely know that you are eating live and active cultures because they were literally bubbling. And so a lot of times you'll be able to tell through the fermented foods, oh yeah, I'm putting in some of these really good microorganisms, and so we want to put those good probiotic rich foods in our bodies. That's going to introduce different strains. So you probably have heard of bifidobacterium or lactobacillus. There's many different strains. And so we just kind of want to diversify. So just incorporating fermented or cultured foods is one strategy to boost the diversity and potentially the amount of the good symbiotic bacteria in our guts. We're still learning how much control we have over diet with this, but one intriguing opportunity. Now, those bacteria will only live for 24 hours unless you feed them well. And so a lot of times, people will ask me about, should I take a probiotic or, if I incorporate the yogurt and the probiotic rich foods, that's part of the puzzle, but we absolutely want to make sure that you feed these good bacteria well, because I mentioned that they'll create those anti-inflammatory compounds, but only when they're fed well. And so plants are going to be their primary food source, but there's actually a subset of plants called prebiotic rich foods. And that is just really describing that these prebiotic foods have a type of fiber that can go all the way down through the digestive system and get down to the lower colon relatively undigested and broken down through the digestive process so that these good bacteria can feast and thrive. So here's a list of foods that will feed your good microbiome because of the type of fiber that they contain. Now, in addition to prebiotic foods, and you can reference that list through the handouts at your leisure, we really want to think about diversity of what we eat. I am absolutely one that will get into routines as well. And so a lot of us will eat our breakfast, lunch, and dinner. We kind of figure out what works for us, and we kind of eat more of a constrained, we don't have a lot of different options, or we don't change it up very often. And so the gut microbiome will thrive if you give it different types of plants. So I want you to think about variety, because if you've ever had to cook for somebody else, whether it's a significant other or children or grandchildren, I'm sure you've encountered that everyone has an opinion about what's for dinner. These bacteria are no different. So you have trillions of opinions about what's for dinner. So some bacteria are going to love the banana that you eat in the morning or the oatmeal, but others are going to want the almonds, others are going to want some of the broccoli or the cauliflower. So I just encourage you, when you go shopping, just try to mix it up. Try to branch out and work in different types of plants. When you craft a meal, if you're roasting vegetables, try to put 2 or 3 different kinds of vegetables on the pan instead of just one. If you're making a salad, see how colorful you can make it. A lot of times trying to incorporate 4 or 5 different kinds of vegetables in a salad is a really smart strategy that will nourish these good bacteria and help create those anti-inflammatory compounds. So I just want to pause for a moment and just ask anyone if you have any questions about the gut microbiome and how to nourish our digestive system.
Yeah, we've got a couple here. And so there's one that's a leftover from last section that I'll address, but there was a person that wanted to know what they should look for in a probiotic, and if you have any brands. And I don't know what your comfort level is in recommending brands, but maybe start first with what to look for in a probiotic, and then, experimentation is always good as well.
Right. Yes. And so, probiotic, right now, I did just look at the research for 2021. There is some promising research for people who have a clinically diagnosed depression or anxiety that it may be helpful as a supplement. Now, before I would ever have you add anything, I would absolutely encourage you to talk to your medical care team, because you want to make sure that there's no contraindications for the medications or, health conditions that you have. So if you are considering adding something, definitely run it by your primary care provider. The effect on stress per se, there's not as much research that is conclusive that it may do anything. So that would be up to you, but it's always, balancing the cost and the effort with the outcome. So you would want to trial that and just notice if it makes any kind of impact. When you're looking for a probiotic supplement, you want to look for various strains. And so you want to look for some, multiple strains, because there's research that having more diversity of the types of bacteria is better. You also want to look for, a moderate dose. So some people will react to even just 1 billion CFU or units. And so you just have to be careful, because sometimes adding probiotics will cause a little bit of a bloat for some people. So if you have IBS or you have any digestive system, you would want to go slow. Probiotics can range from 1 billion to 350 billion. I mean, there is a big range on how potent these are. So a lot of times, if you're new to this, you may want to start a little bit on the lower end, maybe 5, maybe 10 billion CFU. That's the number of units of bacteria. And then you can kind of see what your tolerance is. And now there's interesting, I have a database that I typically go through to help clients identify which strains may be beneficial for them based on the research and what their medical history is. So there is some research that's out there looking at specific strains on health conditions. And so you'll see that marketed often on those probiotic supplements. But if you want some support to kind of identify, otherwise you could start with a multi-strain, and you can always see how your symptoms improve or if they don't. And then we can always kind of shift and look for strains that might be more beneficial.
What about kombucha?
Kombucha definitely works as well. Yes, that's one of the fermented drinks that you could opt for. And so again, everyone's tolerance is different. So just start slow. There's even some, they're called cultured gut shots. So they're like smaller. I believe Farmhouse is the brand. So those are interesting. There's also a Good Belly probiotic juice that comes in small containers, and the beautiful part is when you open up the lid, there's a smiley face. That's how it's cut into the top that you drink through. So, might make you a little happier to drink that. So those are some opportunities as well. And just going back to brands, the brands vary. Consumer Lab will go through brands and of any supplements to make sure it actually contains what it says it contains and doesn't have any contaminants, because you have to realize supplements are not regulated. So if you want support picking a brand, let me know, because we can look at Consumer Lab and make sure that it's approved, that it's gone through independent testing, and that it doesn't have any pollutants, and it actually contains what it's saying that it does have.
Okay, so just to be clear, that Consumer Lab is actually something you could Google and look it up yourself if you wanted to look at.
It requires a membership. So a lot of times I'll do that for my clients.
All right, gotcha. All right. And then one last question here before we move on. Is it possible to overdose on specific vitamins by being too much in a routine with vegetables?
So I just want to clarify the question. You're asking if you could have too much coming from food, is that correct?
Yeah, or vegetables. Like I've heard people eating, like, say, a lot of carrots, and they eat so many carrots that their eyes turn orange or their skin turns orange. So that's how I'm interpreting this question.
I mean, definitely too much of anything, you're going to risk imbalances, because you're not eating other things, right? So whenever we fixate on one food, we're going to, miss opportunities, literally, of the diversity. So yes, I mean, and also just sometimes I have, clients that get really excited, they go all in. But if you have a history of any kind of irritable bowel syndrome, IBS, I mean, you gotta be careful. You would need to give your body time to adjust to these foods, because I don't want you to feel uncomfortable and bloated and then not want to eat these. So a lot of times people will start with cooked vegetables. And yes, you gotta be careful that you're not over relying on just one. I would rather see, you kind of mix it up and see if you can get more color in that meal and just more diversity of plants throughout the week. And definitely, you know, living in Minnesota, we have the opportunity to eat seasonally, right? So, you know, kind of like ebbing and flowing with the seasons is another great strategy to mix it up. So I love my berries in the summer, and I have a whole lot of clementines that are obviously not in season in Minnesota, but in Florida that are coming up to us. And we're enjoying the clementines this time of year. And we just got through apple and pear season. So I do think it's valid to really kind of flow with the season so that you get really fresh fruits and vegetables as well.
Thank you. Perfect.
So this last part we're going to talk about is kind of like, what are some key nutrients that we want to make sure that you're not deficient in, especially to help us stabilize our mood. I'm going to talk about this in 3 different categories. Specifically, I just want to let you know, nutrition is amazing because the nutrients that we eat often are the building blocks of neurotransmitters, hormones, of multiple, things that are incredibly important for our health. And so just going to highlight a few of the key neurotransmitters that a lot of you have heard about, and we'll talk about that and how we can calm our bodies, but they are nutrient dependent. So we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about the fight or flight response, that kind of like, feeling stressed and ready to run or fight back. That's our body communicating through the nerve cells. And so there is a nutrient involved in that process. And then just the health of our cell membranes, which we'll get into a lot of the anti-inflammatory foods. So first off, the neurotransmitters, what are they? They're literally the chemical messengers or the language of the brain. So I'm sure that most of you have heard about serotonin, and we're going to talk a little bit more in detail on that one tonight. But I just wanted to highlight briefly, there's 7 key neurotransmitters involved in the body. And, they're all important. It's not that we want one to dominate the other. And it's not that we want to have excessive amounts of one versus deficient amounts of the same neurotransmitter. So an example is glutamate. That's one of our neurotransmitters that helps us get excited. It's really stimulating when we want to learn. So, whenever we're engaged in a learning process, the glutamate is the chemical messenger in the brain that's kind of taking a lead on that. Now, a lot of us have also heard about dopamine. So dopamine is like the neurotransmitter when we feel that sense of reward. So we accomplish something, we feel wakeful, we're engaged. That's usually the neurotransmitter that's associated with that reward system. Adrenaline is that fight or flight. So that's the one that a lot of us feel like we're just turned on all day and we're kind of like a little bit high strung. And so that's the one it's important because it helped us survive, right? It helps us to send fuel to our muscles so we can move. It helps us to breathe faster so that we can have oxygen to react. And so it's not necessarily a bad thing. It's just that when it's dominant, that's probably when we're feeling a little bit jittery or stressed, throughout our day. On the flip side, in the blue, these are tending to be more of those calming neurotransmitters, serotonin. So that's the one that we know, it's kind of that release of taking a deep breath, calming, landing. It's related to feeling happy or joy. GABA is another calming neurotransmitters. GABA actually helps to slow down some of the communication in the brain to kind of say, okay, let's calm down some of the thoughts and the reactions. And so GABA is well known for being it inhibits a little bit, it calms down the body. And acetylcholine is another one that's linked to just needing adequate acetylcholine neurotransmitters because they're involved in a lot of the movement. So that is going to be kind of like calming our heart rate down, dilating our blood vessels. And obviously, Patty talked about this 2 weeks ago, the oxytocin is kind of like that love neurotransmitter. It's kind of like we get that release when we get to like hug or we're feeling engaged and connected with people. So these are just a brief overview. Again, we don't necessarily want to have too much or too little. I just wanted to highlight that there's many different neurotransmitters that are involved in our mood. And we're going to delve into a few, 3 specific ones related to calming our bodies. And we're going to go behind the scenes to see which nutrients we need to create these. So the 3 that we're going to discuss is serotonin, GABA, and acetylcholine. So like I mentioned, serotonin is the neurotransmitter, which again is just meaning the chemical language of the brain that helps us to stabilize our mood. It helps us feel grounded, well-being. It's actually the precursor to melatonin. So if you think about it, kind of like how we want to come down at the end of the night, the serotonin is going to help us produce melatonin that will in essence help us sleep. I also mentioned serotonin is primarily produced in the gut. Well, that's because it's involved in digestion. So a lot of times, making sure that we have the building blocks for serotonin is important for, again, like calming that gut down. Specifically, serotonin is actually built from the proteins that we eat in our foods. Now, most of us, just so you know, eat probably 2 or 3 times as much tryptophan than we actually need. So I'm not necessarily advocating that you need to eat more of these foods because most Americans eat plenty of tryptophan-rich foods. The message is more about, again, spacing the protein throughout the day. And so you can use nuts, seeds, soy, oats for more of a non-animal based. Otherwise, you can definitely use lean proteins as well. But literally, this serotonin is created and has building blocks from the protein-rich foods that we eat. The reason why I bring this up is I'm going to link this back to how we started and how important blood sugar control is. Because when we're stressed, I don't know about you, but I'm not necessarily reaching for, a turkey leg, even though I know there's tryptophan in turkey, right? So we all talk about Thanksgiving is coming and we're all tired and relaxed after our meal. It's all the tryptophan, the serotonin that our bodies are making. Well, yes, but actually a lot of times what people don't realize is that we crave sugar because when we eat carbohydrates, in an indirect way, it helps the tryptophan or the serotonin. Well, it helps the tryptophan, the building block, get across the blood-brain barrier and make the serotonin neurotransmitter that we need to relax. So let me say that again. Serotonin is made from tryptophan or protein in our diet. But the reason why we don't crave protein is that it actually can't get across the blood-brain barrier without the use of carbohydrates. Okay, so that being said, let's think about spacing again our protein throughout the day, and then just acknowledge that we actually need some quality carbohydrates to help us calm down. The reason why we go for sugar is that it acts quicker. I mean, I talk a lot about habit loops with my clients because we all develop habits. We're cued, we react, and there's some kind of reward, whether, in some way it's calming our bodies down when we're stressed to reach for sugar. And so, a lot of times I just try to highlight that makes sense so that you don't have to feel bad about it, but maybe we have an opportunity to shift the type of carbohydrate for you to get a better response. And so again, we kind of go back to, well, what quality carbs do you enjoy? So if you notice that you're having sugar cravings or you're feeling really irritable or anxious, one key question is, are you placing quality carbohydrates as you space your protein out throughout the day? You can use fruit, you can use whole grains. I have been exploring farro. You can buy that over at Trader Joe's. Otherwise, high fiber barley, quick cooking high fiber barley is also at Trader Joe's. Sometimes we might use squash or yams or sweet potato. There's a lot of opportunity and it doesn't take much. Literally, there's some research showing just half a cup. So I'm not, if you're not comfortable maybe adding a whole lot of carbs back into your diet for whatever reasons you may have, literally, if you just think about it, a third to a half a cup, notice how your hardest time of the day unfolds, and see if that's not an opportunity for you to use some quality carbohydrates to help you create more serotonin and have that sense of peace. Now, I mentioned GABA is also a neurotransmitter that helps to reduce excitability in the brain. And again, protein is used to help build this neurotransmitter as well. But the nutrient I wanted to focus in on was vitamin B6. So with the pandemic, I've had a lot of reports about increased alcohol consumption. So just want to let you know that you might need a little bit more B6 in your life, because alcohol will actually deplete your body of vitamin B6, and you need B6 to create GABA to calm down. And there's actually some research looking at, GABA, is produced by your body, but not quite enough. So you do need a little bit of, additional food sources in order to have adequate GABA production from B6 rich foods. There's actually a research study right now looking at, is there some effect of nourishing our bodies to ensure adequate GABA for insomnia? So there's some interesting studies that will be unfolding. So looking at your B6 foods, here's some opportunities, incorporating fish or chicken or tofu as some of your protein options. Otherwise, I mentioned again, you could certainly use sweet potatoes, bananas as some of your quality carbs that also contain vitamin B6. Avocado and pistachios are also fantastic for B6. So just an opportunity to add to your shopping list. And then lastly, acetylcholine. So acetylcholine is an interesting neurotransmitter because it's actually really involved in both the fight or flight response, so that's the stress response, and it's also involved in the nervous system calming down. It's in both pieces. It's actually the nervous system communicating to our muscle and how we react. It's also involved in memory and mood. So there's some research out looking at this with Alzheimer's actually. It does require choline, which is a B vitamin. And most of us don't have enough of this in our diet. Now, I'm not advocating excessive amounts of choline because there's too much is never always is not the answer. It can actually cause inflammation if you're over supplementing with choline or eating more than you need. But again, here are some choline rich foods just to support you. Would love it if you explored some of the cruciferous vegetables like the broccoli, the cauliflower, the arugula, kale, Brussels sprouts. Those are all great opportunities to boost your choline from plant sources. Shiitake mushrooms. Even getting creative with some kidney beans or quinoa and kind of doing like a plant-based meal once a week, and kind of pairing those together would also be a way to boost your choline as well. Most of us average around 300 milligrams of choline a day in our typical diet, and the recommendation is 425 milligrams. So just to give you an idea, it's literally maybe introducing one of these foods throughout the day and kind of boosting your choline. It won't take very much. But one of the key nutrients that I'm really intrigued by and that I think is really important to consider is magnesium, because magnesium, one, we typically are deficient in the United States in how much magnesium we consume from our diet. But really, it's really interesting that magnesium is needed to help us become more sensitive to our insulin, which helps with our blood sugar balance. It actually helps stimulate that calming effect of GABA, but it's also depleted with stress. So we really want to work on incorporating more magnesium into our diets. A quarter cup of pumpkin seeds, otherwise termed pepita seeds on the label, will give you half of your magnesium needs for the day. You could also boost your magnesium by putting chia seeds in some of your meals, by incorporating nuts as part of your snacks. And then again, kind of exploring different beans that you can add. Can you boost black beans, kidney beans, garbanzo beans, just kind of incorporating them into either some of your mixed dishes or on the side. And of course, this is the rationale for enjoying our dark chocolate as well. So Lastly, one of the most anti-inflammatory foods that inevitably you've heard about is omega-3 fats. There's a lot of research out on the power of omega-3 fats on being anti-inflammatory systemically, so over the whole body, but also it's important to know that when you're talking about creating a sense of calm, the type of fat that is in our brain is literally the omega-3 fat DHA. And so we want to make sure that we protect the DHA food sources. If you look at this typically going to be in our fatty fish. And so that would be one way to incorporate fish weekly, would be fantastic to boost your omega-3s. The Monterey Bay Aquarium Seafood Watch is a great resource to help you kind of tease through the cleaner sources. So you can access this as a free app or on their website to look at which fish are going to be the cleanest. Of the fish that are going to have the most omega-3s, the anti-inflammatory fats, you're looking at salmon, you're looking at tuna, cod, trout, and if you're really creative, anchovies and sardines. So those are going to have the most omega-3 fats. So love it if you still want to enjoy flounder or tilapia, but let's try to make sure you protect some of these more omega-3 rich fish at least once a week. If you'd prefer to do this through plant sources, this is going to be kind of focusing on some of the different seeds and nuts. So flaxseed, chia seeds, hemp seeds, walnuts, the soybeans, and algae oil. Some of my vegans will do algae omega-3 supplements as an option. Otherwise, some people who just don't enjoy eating fish will sometimes think about also doing maybe a fish oil supplement, which would have the omega-3 fats in them. Just want to take a moment. I'm actually going to summarize a few key points as we close, but I just want to offer up any questions that anyone had on those key nutrients, really looking at how nutrition can nourish just the language of the brain and all of the chemical messengers that we need to be active in calming our body and kind of serving the purpose that it's meant to be.
We do have a couple. There's two questions here that are linked. The first question was, how many grams of protein should I have with each snack or little meal? How many grams per day? And then as a follow-up, so it's important to space the carbs and the protein, or the protein and carbs be paired at each snack/meal?
Great question. So your protein needs are actually based on your weight. The RDA is literally 0.8 grams of protein per kilogram of your body weight. So what that means is you would take your weight and divide it by 2.2. That's how many kilograms you weigh. To keep it simple, a palm of protein gets it done. So typically, if you're looking at, so that was the RDA is for the whole day. So that's a minimum 0.8 grams per kilogram of your body weight. Research is showing that some, especially as we age, so we might need a little bit more protein, depending on keeping our lean muscle mass. So some will increase that to 1.2 grams of protein per kilogram of your body weight. If you like to do math, that's kind of like the daily intake. That is a little bit more aligned with if you're trying to maintain lean muscle mass and if you're doing, different kinds of physical exercise. It can range up though from there. So it really comes down, again, a personal need. So, about 0.8 minimum to, if you're averaging 1.2 grams of protein per kilogram of your body weight. Now, you can simplify that. Most women, literally, 10 to 15 grams of protein at a snack, and looking at probably 20 to up to 40 at the most, 35 grams of protein for a meal. So if you want to keep it simple, usually I just have clients just try to think about, are you seeing protein? You know what I mean? Do you even see it kind of like spaced out? Then the next step is if someone prefers to count grams, or they're more conscious of the labels, you're aiming for that 10 to 15 grams of protein possibly for snacks. Maybe you're going to do closer to 20 to 35 grams for your meals, but literally the palm of your hand. This in like animal protein is going to be about 5 ounces, and that's 35 grams of protein. So even if you're doing vegetarian sources, you know, a cup of beans is going to be about 16. So you just kind of want to make sure that you're seeing it. You can almost use your hand visual just to guide you. And you don't necessarily have to force it. You just want to see it spread throughout the day.
Right.
Yeah, and you don't necessarily have to force the combinations. You just want to make sure that you balance it out. Like I mentioned, kind of dancing around that plate throughout the day. Sometimes people get better blood sugar control when they pair things together, whether or not they're adding nuts or seeds with a piece of fruit or something along those lines. But again, that would be up to you. As long as you're balancing it throughout the day, you'll probably be fine.
All right. Do you have a feeling about protein shakes?
I do. I think they work for a lot of people. They're in essence sometimes a meal replacement. I know that a lot of my clients are just get overwhelmed with, they just don't know what to eat, or they're fatigued, they have chronic pain, they don't want to necessarily cook. You can certainly get enough protein from food sources. Yogurt works. But if someone wanted to do a protein shake, they can have a role. You just want to make sure that you're choosing a quality one. You know, if you're doing a whey-based protein powder, you know, you just want to make sure that it's got minimal ingredients, because a lot of these protein powders have a lot of nutrients added to them. So if you're taking a multivitamin, you don't necessarily need to have a protein powder or shake with a ton of vitamins and minerals in it. So just know that some of them are serving more than just the protein piece. You know, there's vegan sources as well. So there's some great options, you know, for whey proteins. I like Ascent. You know, it's a very minimal ingredient list. It really tries to keep the sugar substitutes low. I don't necessarily love a lot of the sugar substitutes because of the research out on the gut and how the microbiome reacts to excessive amounts. If you have a small amount, and I understand that if you're trying to control your blood sugar, it makes sense, but Ascent would only have monk fruit in it. It doesn't have a whole lot of others. Otherwise, some will have just stevia. They'll go more of the natural sugar substitutes versus some of the more chemical versions, like aspartame and some of the others. So you can think about like a whey powder, like, you know, you can look at Ascent. There's Terra's Whey is a great brand. Whole Foods has a lovely array. If you're thinking vegan, Ascent just came out with a brand new vegan powder. Momentous is interesting. That's a pretty clean vegan option for you as well. And also there's going to be Garden of Life. It has an unsweetened version that wouldn't have any sugar or sugar substitutes added to it.
All right. Is it possible to get too much B6? And if so, it, you know, is it toxic?
No, it's water soluble. So you should urinate it out if you're over consuming it, but some people are sensitive. I mean, some people are doing B complex supplements and they're pretty high doses. So if you notice that it ramps you up, then maybe pull back. But it should be water soluble, which means that you should not store it in your body. Again, if you notice that you're feeling, you know, negative consequences of like B6 or complex, talk to your medical team and really determine whether or not you're reacting to it in a beneficial way or not.
All right. Is granola considered a quality carb? You mentioned quality carbs and referenced a whole bunch of things. Does granola fall in that?
If you make it at home. I mean, it can be, but you just got to be careful of granola that has a lot of hidden sugar. So just make sure you check the label. 4 grams of added sugar is a teaspoon of sugar. And you might be a little surprised that some of the brands have like, you know, 8, 12, 20 grams of added sugar. That means that, I mean, 4 grams is a teaspoon of sugar. So that's going to be more inflammatory than anti-inflammatory. So you just got to make sure that you check the label and go for a quality brand. If you want a great app, Environmental Working Group, so EWG Food Scores. It's a free app. It might come up as healthy living because they're fusing and changing up their platform just a little bit. You can literally scan the barcode of your granola and it will give you a score from 1 to 10, 1 being green, go, 10 being red, stop. But the beautiful thing is you can find healthier alternatives right in that app, and it's really well done. So when in doubt, download or go onto the desktop version of Environmental Working Group's food scores, and you should be able to access that and be able to like identify a healthier granola if you'd like.
All right. I've got a couple more questions here. I don't want to take any more questions because we're already running 10 minutes over, but I wanted to get these questions at least, if that's okay with you.
Yeah.
This person said, my blood sugars are high in the morning. Any tips of what to eat in the morning? You kind of touched on that a little bit. You were talking about the value of protein, but is there anything else that you might share for her?
Some of my clients do well with Mediterranean-based fats. There's a lot of research out with, diabetes control and prevention. When we bring down some of the more processed carbs and we increase those Mediterranean fats, so that's going to be olive oil, avocado. So avocado slices in the morning with some fresh tomatoes, even using olives or hummus. Those bringing up some of those Mediterranean fats while you reduce some of the carbohydrates could really help you with that blood sugar and helping you steady out.
All right. I sometimes, this is the person, not me. I sometimes get up in the middle of the night to eat something and then I can't get back to sleep. Is that cortisol?
It may be, but what I would look more at is, are you calming down? What is your sleep pattern like before you go to bed? So, try to disengage from the blue light at least an hour before, or from any screen, really at least an hour before you want to go to bed. You want to take that time to kind of come down and be like calm and like help you enter into that deeper REM sleep. Sometimes, if you're hungry, kind of like looking at, is there a way to do like quality carbohydrates? So like, tart cherries help produce melatonin, you know what I mean? So we could look at some of those therapeutic foods to see if you can kind of get that serotonin and that melatonin to kind of help you. A big one, make sure you're not drinking alcohol at night. Alcohol will often let us fall asleep quicker, but we don't sleep as deep. And it is very common for someone to wake up in the middle of the night if they happen to have even just a glass of wine with dinner. It can disrupt your sleep. So think about what are you doing to kind of set up your nighttime routine? And I would kind of back up and look at what are you doing around, early evening until the time you go to bed.
All right. Do supplements such as flaxseed and magnesium make a difference?
For some people, magnesium could be replacing a deficiency. Yes. And so, magnesium deficiency, talk to your doctor if you are having restless legs, if you have a lot of headaches, if you have a lot of muscle cramps, that might be showing potentially a magnesium deficiency. It doesn't take much. Sometimes if someone isn't getting enough, it might be just 100 milligram magnesium supplement at night. I wouldn't go over 250 because you're going to go over the RDA of around 300 and some for women. And so, you can definitely consider kind of experimenting with that for a short amount of time if it aligns with your health history. And just FYI, magnesium glycinate, glycinate, will not disrupt your gut. Some people will notice they don't feel well or their GI reacts to magnesium citrate. So just know that the glycinate is easier on the gut if you decide to try a supplement of 100 to up to 250 milligrams with your medical team's approval.
Right. What are your thoughts about monk fruit as a sugar substitute?
I think it tastes a lot cleaner. I mean, that's literally the one that I don't necessarily taste. And that's the one that occasionally I do use the protein powder that has the monk fruit in it. So I think that's, there's a role for everything. I think sometimes the sugar substitutes, do protect us from high blood sugar. So if you have concerns of diabetes or pre-diabetes, there is a role for that. But you just want to make sure that, again, balance is everything, because when we overconsume some of the sugar substitutes, there's studies that it's linked to, it's not linked, it's correlated. So a lot of times when people have a lot of sugar substitute intake, there's also a trend towards people having higher blood sugar and higher cholesterol or higher waist circumference. And we don't quite understand why that's happening. We don't know if it's some other foods that someone's consuming. It just happens that they eat those sugar substitutes, but the research is unfolding. So we just don't know enough about it. So I think there's a role, yes, absolutely, for occasional use of these. But you just want to make sure that you don't over rely on sugar substitutes or on sugar. You just kind of want to really get your taste buds back to nature. You will actually downrate there's an enzyme in your saliva that shifts so that with the more bitter foods you eat, the less bitter they taste to you over time. So sometimes it's just a matter of practice and trying different things.
All right. Well, we're going to wrap it up. So this has been super informative. Thank you so much. And, I think we could just go on and on and on, but what I would encourage people that if we didn't get to your question, or you're motivated to visit with Kim, that you just call the clinic and make an appointment to do a consult with her, and you'll be amazed at the information that she'll impart. So any event, Kim, thank you so much. It was very helpful. I learned a lot myself. And true to form, you are always consistent about a rainbow of foods, diversity, consistency in eating, proteins and carbs. It's been great. So anyway, thank you.
Thank you, everyone. And I hope you have a great evening, and just want to make sure that, putting all of these concepts together, I did do a summary slide. So check that out. That's what's up on the screen right now. It helps you back out and kind of see your overall patterns and what you can do. And this, actionable summary will really help you get close to all of the nutrients that we talked to this evening. And when in doubt, always enjoy flexibility. And through this holiday season, really encourage you just to think about, how you eat is as important as what you eat. So mindfully savor and enjoy this holiday season.
All right. Thank you very much. Thanks for joining us, everybody. Have a good night. Bye-bye.